Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with Pittsburgh-based jazz bassist Richie Goods. He is the youngest person ever inducted into the Pittsburgh Jazz Hall of Fame and just happened to get an early start playing in church and clubs when he was going to the Pittsburgh Creative and Performing Arts High School. From there, it was the Berklee College of Music, then New York City, and there he studied under the jazz legends Ron Carter and Ray Brown. He spent a lot of time playing with the great Mulgrew Miller and gigging with the likes of Louis Hayes and the Cannonball Adderley Legacy Band, Milt Jackson, Russell Malone, Vincent Herring, the Manhattan Transfer, Walter Beasley, DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince, Whitney Houston, and even Christina Aguilera. He also has a Westchester, New York studio producing records for his company, RichMan Music. He talked about this and his newest 2019 CD, My Left Hand Man, a tribute to Mulgrew Miller. So please get to know him and dig this interview, my friends.
So, Richie, hey, thank you for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz today, man. I appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. And thanks for playing the record.
Yeah, man, absolutely. This is going to be a loaded question, but, you know, you've had so much history with Mulgrew Miller, and My Left Hand Man has to be a homage, and there has to be so many things that were a part of this recording. Give me an idea of, you know, how you feel about this recording and what Mulgrew meant to you.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, this is definitely the most special and most important project I feel like I've done in my career. And maybe probably the always be the most dear to my heart because Mulgrew, he meant everything to me. He was it was really my first introduction to the scene, and he kind of went over and beyond to not just have me in his band, but to really have me be a part of the jazz scene and teaching me how, to work with other guys and everything, teaching me about the business and everything. And then also just teaching me about life. He was just such a special person. We would just talk about spirituality. We talked about diet and, I always think about, the way I live my life. I always want to I think about Mulgrew because to me he was like an ideal human being.
Music has always been in your DNA, and I guess we should talk about the lead up to Mulgrew in those years. How was it a part of your DNA from the word go?
I started playing music when I was 5 years old. I remember when I was 4 years old begging my mother to give me, I wanted to play the drums. And she kept saying, if you learn how to play the piano first, you could play the drums. So when I was 5 years old, I started taking piano lessons. I mean, I loved the lessons. I didn't necessarily like to practice what I was learning in the lessons, but I loved the piano lessons, and I just loved playing. I would just play all the time. And no one ever had to tell me, Richie, you need to practice. You need to, do this. I just loved being around music. And so I went from piano, and then finally when I was 8, my mother let me play drums, and I studied for years on the drums, and then I switched to saxophone, guitar. Somehow I ended up on bass. I even played, French horn for a little bit. But I just loved music. I went to Performing Arts High School in Pittsburgh, and I just wanted to go to the best music college, and I ended up at Berklee College of Music. I kind of got introduced to jazz in high school. Actually, my drum teacher in high school was Roger Humphreys, so that's where I got to learn. I got into jazz. And really, jazz was just a tool because I always thought, people used to always say jazz musicians were the most skillful musicians in the world. So I said, well, I want to be the best, so I need to learn jazz. So that's kind of how I got into jazz and just fell in love with it.
What albums or musicians were you listening to in the beginning that really blew your doors down?
Wow. I mean, well, as a kid, before I got into jazz, it was gospel, rock music, R&B. Even my mother was really into folk music, so I used to love Phoebe Snow, a lot of folk music, but I just loved everything. I got into heavy metal for a while, and but definitely funk music was part of it. But when I got into jazz, I started out with people like Clifford Brown and Horace Silver, because Roger Humphreys played with Horace Silver for years. And then, but then I started getting into stuff like I saw Stanley Clarke live, and Stanley Clarke blew me away. So, and that's why I started playing acoustic bass. I said, well, he plays acoustic and electric, so I have to play acoustic and electric. And I was listening to a lot of I was into, Pat Metheny and John Scofield, but I was really into Ron Carter and Ray Brown and just a lot of different stuff. Lonnie Liston Smith. Those were the early years. And then, of course, I got into bebop and Coltrane and definitely Miles Davis. And, I have a pretty eclectic taste in music. And I don't like to put myself, or I don't like to put music in a box. It's just music to me.
Well, speaking about dreams realized, you talk about going to Berklee, getting groomed there, and moving on to New York and studying under Ron Carter and Ray Brown. That had to be quite an experience.
Oh my God, yes. Because I was totally intimidated by both Ron Carter and Ray Brown, and I'm a pretty persistent person, so I talked to Mulgrew about when I first got to New York about studying with Ron, and he said, I talked to Ron, he could give you his number, and, call him, and he'll be glad to give you lessons. I called Ron for about 6 months, and he never returned my call. And so I found out he taught at City College, and I went up and hunted him down, and he made me wait for about 5 hours and said, yeah, come back, see me in 5 hours. I came back to see him, and he said, okay, meet me here next week, same time. But I studied with him for a year, and he was life-changing. He's just one of the greatest teachers ever. He just really understands the bass, and he made the bass seem easy for me to play. I up until that point, I thought it was super hard. He said, no, it's easy. And Ray Brown, I kind of met him on the road. I was touring with Russell Malone, and I was kind of intimidated to go up and say, I would sit with him at dinner, and he would tell jokes, but I wouldn't talk to him that much. But finally, I said, well, Mr. Brown, you think we could do a lesson sometime? And he said, oh, yeah, sure, come to my room. And I went to his room. We hung out for about 2.5 hours. And I said, well, what do I owe you? He said, all you owe me is to, anytime you see me, ask me for a lesson. And we'll do this every time we meet. And I was like, okay. So I had about 5 or 6 lessons with him just from running into him on the road.
Wow, that's amazing. So, you talk about not putting music in a box, and it's been very clear in your career trajectory. You've been around all kinds of different people, and, Louis Hayes, Cannonball Adderley, DJ Jazzy Jeff, Whitney Houston, Christina Aguilera. Talk to me a little bit about what it's been like as you've grown in the music world to be around kind of the legends and luminaries. What have they kind of taught you by either directly talking to you or by osmosis?
Well, I know one thing is there's no substitute for hard work. I feel like all the top artists and musicians that I've met, they're all such hard-working people, and not just the jazz people. In the pop world, in the hip-hop world, whatever it is, if they're at the top, I guarantee you they're hard-working people. And but also, I think we all share this passion for music. It's like most of us started out the same way, just we were kids and we just loved music. We had this passion for music. And then as we grew, we just kind of branched off into different things. But I feel there's no difference in musicians.
Everything has really paid off for you in your career. You're the youngest person ever inducted into the Pittsburgh Jazz Hall of Fame. What does that mean to you?
Oh, man. Well, Pittsburgh has such a rich legacy for jazz. So, man, that's major. Actually, I think in any artist's career, every once in a while you start doubting yourself and think, well, is my career really where it should be, or is it really going in the right direction, and am I really as good as some people say? But sometimes there's things like that I have to look back on to help me realize that you've worked really hard for what you've achieved, and you have achieved great success in your career, and but there's always still more work to do. So, just having that honor of being, named with the greats like Art Blakey, Ray Brown, Stanley Turrentine, Kenny Clark. The list goes on. Billy Eckstein, Billy Strayhorn, like Dakota State. I can't name them all, but it's just really an honor to be in that mentioned in the company of those people.
The other part of you too is that you have your own company, RichMan Music. Talk to me about this venture and how satisfactory it is for you and your development, not only as an artist, but as a businessman.
I did so much sideman work for years, and for a long time, actually when I was playing with Mulgrew, I feel like so many people, like I was saying before, they try to put you in a box. And when I was playing with Mulgrew, he had this hardcore, straight-ahead jazz fans and jazz community, and I think a lot of people associated me with that, and that's what they wanted me to be. But but Mulgrew wasn't like that. Mulgrew, his mind was open. He just chose to do straight-ahead jazz. But, Mulgrew played in one of my first bands. It was like a funk rock fusion band. He played Fender Rhodes and synthesizer. So Mulgrew encouraged me to do my own things and let me be myself. And so I started my production company because I've always been into producing. And I was producing R&B, hip-hop, pop music. But I kind of changed, straight away from a lot of the pop stuff and start doing more jazz. So I've been producing some jazz records but primarily my own records. Instead of waiting for people to call me, I decided to take matters into my own hands and start my own company, make my own records, and do things the way I want to do it. Because I felt like there weren't a lot of record labels that wanted to record the kind of music that I wanted to do. So I figured, but I knew there was an audience that wanted to hear it. So instead of kind of doing what the record labels wanted me to do, I decided to do things my way.
So are you happy with where you're at in your career? You look at it on paper and you got to think, man, this is amazing. But on a human level, are you satisfied?
That's an interesting question. I'm content with growth. I'll never be at a point where I say, okay, I'm there, or okay, I'm good. I've done what I wanted to do. I'll never get to that point, but I can't feel disappointed about where I am. But I just try to always enjoy the journey of getting there. And I know it's going to take a lot more hard work, but for the rest of my life, I'll probably be working hard and striving for the next level. I'm content because I still see growth. And I don't compare myself to other people, to other artists, because I feel like every artist and every person in their life journey has their own path and their own time of achieving things. And I think the universe has something different for everybody, and they have a different time. So now I'm achieving things, that some people achieved when they were in their teens or in their 20s. But I've achieved a lot more. But a lot of people, when they get to my age, they stop growing. But I'm still growing and just climbing the ladder. So I'm content with that.
What do you like best about being a musician?
Oh, wow. That's the most amazing job in the world. Well, first of all, to be on the bandstand, and that's the beauty of jazz, to be on the bandstand with a few other musicians. And when I play, I tend to close my eyes, and I can just feel this communication and everyone just talking and cooperating together and just working together to just make this beautiful sound. And it is, I get kind of emotional when I play. There's just like this, this feeling, this emotion. And then when you see it affects the audience, that feeling is even on another level, because you're kind of spreading emotion and evoking emotions into other people. And to me, that is one of the most amazing feelings in the world.
So everything's going to lead up to this final question here, and I want to know this. Everyone has a perception of you, who they think you are, your family, your friends, your fans, but you live your life. Who do you think you are?
Wow. Good question. Who do I think I am? I'm still discovering myself. And I think very few people actually know really who I am. Because you might see me play with so many different artists and think I'm something. You might hear me talking about, Charlie Parker, Miles Davis, and think I'm something. But my favorite artist is Jimi Hendrix. I don't know. I feel like I'm a very open person. I'm an Aquarius. I'm just a person who loves life and music. I love people, and I like to spread the love, and I don't like the love to have boundaries. So I guess I'm a person with no boundaries.
That's a great answer, man. Richie, thank you for taking some time out today to talk with Neon Jazz. Good luck with the new album and with your career, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest cats in Pittsburgh, New York, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Richie for his time, cool, and stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.